Well, Mick Ryan, thanks so much for joining us again on Afternoon Briefing. Now, it does appear highly credible now that Russians are ready to strangle Kyiv if they can. They have it at least surrounded on three sides. What happens next?
Well, they haven't fully surrounded it yet, and they haven't conducted offensive operations for a couple of days. It actually appears that they're running out of momentum. So I'm not sure whether they're capable of fully surrounding Kyiv, let alone seizing it.
Would that bother them, though, or would they advance at any cost? Do you have to wait for full encirclement?
Well, I think they would want to offer the Ukrainians the opportunities to surrender, because the Russians know that fighting in a city, especially one as large and as well defended as Kyiv, is going to be enormously costly. Russian casualties are already starting to cause the Russians problems. More casualties will only be more domestic and political problems from Putin, aside from the tragedy of the lives lost.
Is there any evidence that they are suffering shortfalls of the all-important ingredients, not just national will, but I'm talking about munitions? It seems almost unfathomable that a country with forces the size of Russia's might have to phone a friend in, say, Xi Jinping. But is that a realistic scenario?
Oh, I think we've seen over the last 20 years that precision munitions are the first thing most advanced militaries use. One, because they hit their targets more often than dumb munitions, but they're also more expensive and not held in as large a quantity. So it's not unexpected they're running low on precision munitions. They are replacing these obviously with dumb bombs, artillery and long-range rocket strikes from within Russia.
And on the Ukrainian side, are their supplies in effect limitless? I suppose they use a narrower range of weapons compared to the Russians, but they are not so constrained?
Well, there's no such thing as limitless ammunition. They are getting a good flow through of precision anti-tank and anti-aircraft weapons from the West at the moment. How long that lasts with Russia's step up of the war in the West, we'll see. But they are two very critical and very important natures of ammunition for the Ukrainians in the coming days and weeks.
Now, the attack on the Mariupol hospital, women and children shown to the world as suffering there, what does that tell you as a military analyst of the tactics that Russia felt necessary to employ?
Well, they're obviously desperate. Mariupol is a big sticking point for the Russians in the south. It's preventing them linking up their forces in the east and the west on the coast, southern coast of the Ukraine. Now, whether it was deliberate or accidental, attacking hospitals and those kind of facilities against the laws of armed conflict, and Russian military leaders who are responsible should be and eventually will be held to account.
And you think, as a case in point, that particular attack would be easy to prove as a war crime?
Well, I mean, the International Criminal Court has commenced an investigation into a whole range of Russian activities from 2013 forward. They announced that on the 2nd of March. These are the kinds of incidents where there is large-scale deaths of civilians, which is very unnecessary, that they would investigate. We should, however, understand that these kind of investigations take a long time to come to fruition.
Yep. Now, the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is employing every argument he possibly can to try to get NATO to join this fight. One of the more recent ones, Mick Ryan, was to suggest that there is an inevitability about Russia misfiring, miscalculating and somehow landing a shell into NATO territory. Poland, I think, was one example cited. Do you think he's on firm ground there, or are the Russian forces a little better than that?
Well, if you're the president of a country that's under attack from three sides by a much bigger and much nastier dictatorship, you would be using every stratagem you can to get people into the war. Remember, Churchill did the same with the Americans for a couple of years before they entered the Second World War. So we should expect that President Zelensky will try and get help in any way that he can. I think the scenario of the Russians accidentally shelling Poland is possible, but very unlikely. What's more likely is that Russians may attack some form of third country convoy carrying aid supplies across the western border. That's very dangerous and very high risk for the Russians.
I think they're actually warning as much, aren't they, that they would view as legitimate targets convoys resupplying the Ukrainians from the west.
Yeah, and it's an escalation in the war. Essentially, what the Russians are saying is, we don't care what your nationality is. If you're bringing an aid, we're going to target you. So that certainly is a Russian escalation. We've seen from the bombings and missile attacks over the weekend in at least 2 sites there that Russia is happy to expand this war to suit their needs.
Yep. Now, I know I flagged last time we spoke, Mick, that we want to explore the counterfactual here, you know, to actually contemplate the successful mission for Russian forces under Vladimir Putin's command. You would like to think that military planners are wargaming this. What likelihood do you think that he is in fact emboldened and rides a wave of nationalistic support that he hasn't been seeing so far in Russia, but which does bubble up in the event of seizing full control in Ukraine?
Well, certainly he was initially shocked at the response from the West to support the Ukraine. However, I think the MiG-29 decision has been seen by Putin as a chink in the Western armour, that they are not willing to provide boots on the ground, and he will continue to do everything he can to push the limits of Western tolerance to take over Ukraine. They're a big army, they're a big military, and he will continue to feed in forces, including Syrians, including other nationalities, if he can get them, to take over as much of Ukraine as he possibly can.
Yeah, well, that might be something that we'll be chatting about in all the weeks that follow. But Mick Ryan, for your latest analysis on this terrible war, thanks for joining us on Afternoon Briefing today.
Thanks, Greg.